Well, g'day guys. Welcome week 7. We're nearly toward the end of the series. Well, we're at the end of toward the end of the series now. 7, 8, 9, and then week 10 if you are able to do week 10. We're up to Genesis 29 to 35 this week, which is a big slab of text all about Jacob and what happens to him after he leaves Esau and his parents. So we're going to get into that today. You'll notice that the ongoing theme seems to be a lot about God's faithfulness despite the sinfulness of his people. So tonight we're going to look at that again. We're going to tweak that a bit at the end about the discipline of God when we're sinning against him and when we're sinful. Just the discipline of being a Christian. So it's going to a bit of a tweak just to change the application for what we've usually been doing, just to focus on something else which is part of what we're looking at out of this text, just a little bit of a different one. All right, intro. Now, my intro question is discipline a good thing? How does it work for the benefit of the one being disciplined? So just talk about that idea, maybe if you've got kids or you've had bad experiences before, good experiences, all those sorts of things about discipline, because we talk about, as I said, a little bit about that later. Okay, well, after a little bit of intro blurb, after Jacob runs away from Esau, he comes across his relatives, and that's Laban and his daughters. After some impressively shifty footwork, Laban manages to marry off his two daughters, Rachel and Leah, to Jacob in return for 14 years of hard labour. So that leads us into Genesis 29, 31 to 30:24. And that's where, after he marries the girls, what happens with their families, how many kids they have, all that sort of stuff. So read through the text, and then it would be great to have some big bits of butcher's paper if you've got it, or maybe some A3 paper, a couple of A4 bits of paper stuck together, something like that. So in groups of 2, people might draw up the family tree that they read from this, because family tree that comes out of this chapter is essential for what comes in the future, and also the rest of the Bible. So take some time to do it. It's going to be a little bit of a different activity, but people like that every now and then, so hopefully that will be helpful. Tonight's a bit more interactive in this sort of way. Question 2, this passage is the centerpiece, the one that we've just read, of the account of Jacob, with the promises of God to Abraham and then Jacob in mind. There's a full stop there. With the promises of God to Abraham and then Jacob in mind, why is this account of the birth of Abraham's children so important? So keeping that in the back of your head, it's a significant passage because it details the birth of the 12 sons of Jacob, who becomes known as Israel in chapter 32 when he wrestles with God. Now these 12 sons become the 12 tribes of Israel, and it's through the 12 tribes that the Israelite nation is established, and through whom the promises of God will be fulfilled. So Paul talks about Jesus, and when we flick over to the New Testament, we might like to look at this, about Jesus being the fulfillment of the promises that the 12 tribes of Israel are waiting for. So why not have a look at that as well, because we always want to be getting back to Jesus every study. Question 3. This section describes for us the birth of the 12 tribes of Israel. How would you describe this family? How are they happy? What's the characteristics? How has it all come together? You'll find that they're not going so well, and it's not such a great family. You wouldn't think you'd want to start, the kingdom of God on families such as this. Question 4. What do we discover about the person and deeds of Jacob and his family in this section? And what my thought is there is make 2 lists. One list of all the positive things that we see throughout this section, and one of all the negative things we see. For example, we see the way that Jacob treats Leah really poorly, and the names that she gives her children are very sad about. Now my husband will love me because I've given him another son, or 2 sons, or 3 sons. We see Rachel. Jacob loves her, but then she's unable to have children. We see sadness in that. And we see the need by Rachel to use a surrogate wife for Jacob, so she could give birth, and that could be Rachel's son. But then we see the competition of the wives when Leah does the same thing. And then you've got the wives and the concubines, you've got all 4 of them. Rachel, you see her buy mandrakes, mandrakes are this ancient fertility plant drug thing from Leah. So Rachel buys them from Leah in exchange for Leah's chance to sleep with Jacob again. And then we see good things. We see good things out of this, like where God remembered Rachel and she gave birth to a boy. So go down a couple of lists, and then after writing the list out, come up with a description for each one of the main characters, for Jacob, for Leah, for Rachel, and for God. Maybe just a couple of sentences for each person. And the idea there is to contrast the life of God's people and the faithfulness of God in his circumstances. So God continues to be faithful to them, even though they're out there doing everything, who knows what. So on the human level, this account demonstrates the craving of human beings for love and recognition and what happens when you thwart those things. But on the divine level, on the God's level, it shows the grace of God to continue to choose difficult and unpromising subjects, unpromising people to bring about his promises. Question 6. God disciplines those he loves but continues to be faithful to his people. How do we see this in the life of Jacob so far? Go through the major events that we've seen in his life, flick back through, and then see God disciplining him, but he continues to uphold his blessings for Jacob. And then lastly, read Hebrews 12, 7 to 11. Where have you seen, and then ask the question, where have you seen the discipline of God in your life? How have you found that to produce a harvest of righteousness and peace, that discipline? How have you found that discipline brings about a harvest of righteousness and peace for you? And are there areas that you need God's discipline in your life at this time? So a pretty confronting question, maybe hopefully helpful for moving people on, seeing how they're responding to God at the moment. And then pray and give thanks to God for these things. My tip of the week this week's a pretty easy one, and that is have a set finishing time and work really hard at finishing on time. Some people find it very difficult to be able to hang around afterwards, and nobody wants to leave halfway through a study. It can be really ugly, but when you know you're going to be finished every week at this certain time, it's very helpful for some people. You feel people can hang around afterwards if you like to keep it going. That's always great for people to hang out and chat and continue to talk, but it's great to try and finish on time. It makes people feel like their time is worthwhile, and if they need to go, they can. Anyway, I hope you're having a good week, and look forward to catching up for next week, week 8. See ya.